Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Speaking of the Arts. This is the second episode in our special Artists During Quarantine series that we're doing, and today we're featuring the NEA jazz master Delfeayo Marsalis. We also have Marie LeClaire on the conversation, so the two of us talked to Delfeayo to hear more about his new album, Jazz Party, and it was a real pleasure hearing him talk about this. We also go in depth about how he approaches his Uptown Jazz Orchestra, the unique things that they do while they're on stage, the unique ways they interact with each other, and most importantly, the unique ways in which they interact with the audience. I had an absolute pleasure speaking with Delfeayo, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. I have to make one correction. At the beginning of the episode, I am talking about the fact that the Boston Marathon has been postponed, and I incorrectly referred to it as the 125th running when 2020 is actually the 124th running. My apologies to all the runners this year, and I do hope you guys get to do the race in September, and hopefully it won't be rescheduled again. Thanks again for listening, everybody.
Delfeayo, Marie, welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. Sir Epstein, how are you?
You know, I'm just fine. I was just telling you that today is Patriots Day in Boston, and that's supposed to be the marathon. I think it would have been the 125th consecutive running of it. But it has been rescheduled to September, and hopefully they don't have to push it back after that.
Well, the good news, though, is that whenever it occurs, it will then be the 122nd, is it, consecutive?
Yeah, well, you know, I was thinking, too, I mean, when did, wait, say it again? I think that just went over my head, I'm sorry.
No, you said it was supposed to be the which consecutive?
It's supposed to be the 125th.
125th, right, sorry, so. Whenever they have it, it will be the 125th consecutive running.
Exactly. Just not for the time of year, but that's okay. But I think you're experiencing something similar in New Orleans with the Jazz Fest. It has been pushed back to the fall.
Jazz Fest is, I believe, pushed back to next year. So we're going to skip this year altogether.
Okay. Was it supposed to be in the fall at one point? Or maybe I'm not remembering correctly. I guess I didn't hear correctly.
Right. Well, there's the French Quarter Festival, which was moved to October, and there was speculation that the Jazz Festival would also be moved, but they just decided to cancel. Pretty much they're canceling everything for this year, and I guess just going to regroup and try to plan on next year.
Right. Yeah, there's so many questions right now about what sizes of groups are going to be able to function in the next 6 months, and nobody really knows, and especially if it's going to be left up to the states, then everybody's going to be sort of on their own as far as what they're able to do. I've been having a lot of conversations with presenters these past few weeks, and everybody is trying to figure everything out, and one thing that's becoming clear is if you're managing 1,000 seat or a 3,000 seat or whatever size theater, and you're only allowed to have, pick a number, 200 people maybe at a time, maybe that, maybe not that. What do?
Right.
Do you have an artist do 5 shows in a night to get up to 1,000? So people are really trying to figure things out right now. It's very difficult, as you guys know.
5 shows and maybe shorter shows. That's like old school. A lot of the jazz clubs do play 45-minute sets, and so there were more of those. I don't know if it was quite 5. Yeah, it might have been 5 45-minute shows. So maybe we'll see a reduction in the length of the shows, and then more shows that way. Or the other thing is just to accept that the smaller number of people in the venue. And obviously it's not always ideal, but, things change, and adaptability is something that we have to have.
Right. Well, also, I was thinking about this because when TV came out, everybody said, oh, that's the end of radio, but radio is still more popular than ever. And then when when Netflix came out, everybody said, "Oh, that's the end of movies," but movies are more popular than ever. So I don't think, I don't think people need to panic and worry that with live streaming, live music is going out the window. I think what will happen is people want both. They're going to want the option to go see a live show, but they're also going to want to be able to click online and see the show as well.
Someone who I was speaking to who has a 900-seat theater was saying that they were exploring the possibility of doing that, just selling fewer tickets, but then also having, do you guys remember years ago, I'm sure, I don't think it exists anymore, that pay-per-view, you could, certain boxing matches and concerts and stuff that you could pay your cable provider to see a particular live event. So they were talking about maybe that would be an option because they wouldn't be able to sell as many tickets, but maybe for a fee you could pay to watch it online. It wouldn't necessarily be like a free, live streaming thing, but as another way to sort of make up the revenue for whatever fees they're paying the musicians.
Well, if this whole pandemic has shown us anything, it is the major difference between actually experiencing a show live in person and streaming or seeing. It's such a different experience when you're watching this computer and you're seeing and you're hearing things, whereas when you're actually there, emotionally how it moves you. And so I think for sure that I don't think we're at risk of losing the audiences. The main thing is that people have to feel that it's a safe environment and that we've somehow managed to get this whole pandemic under control. The big question is, when is that going to happen? But I would imagine it's going to be a major form of, I guess, like cabin fever, where folks are just so ready to get out and experience things that touch them emotionally, especially music that really means something to them, that we'll see. I think it'll be a great growth in live performance of people, audiences in live performances once the whole pandemic is under control.
Yeah, I agree. What's it like in New Orleans as far as, are you still hearing music sort of from musicians out in their homes, on the streets? I mean, to the best extent that people could do that safely, do you still have a sense of that community there, even though people can't go to a club?
Well, there's the tuba player down the street, and I think I've heard him practice 2 or 3 times really loud out in the street. And there's a homeless guy who has a saxophone, and he's still at it. He's that's what he does. But I'm not in an area, like, I don't have a lot of musicians living within, a 3 or 4 block radius where I would know if they're practicing or if they're playing. But, I've seen some videos of guys that are outside and they have the track going and they're playing. So I think that's going on. But, again, it's just not quite the same. Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked actually is because I was watching a live stream last night of the singer Kat Edmondson was doing a live stream from her apartment in Brooklyn, but she started it with she was kind of by her window and the window was open, and she was explaining to everybody at that time of night in her neighborhood, a lot of her neighbors are just kind of expressing their, I guess for lack of a better word, expressing themselves musically. Even if they don't have instruments, you could hear people banging on pots and pans and just kind of shouting to each other, but in a completely positive way. And
in New York City, it's every night in New York City at 7:00.
That's been going on since the social distancing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but it's all New York City, so it's at 7:00 every night. I hear it. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we don't have that here.
We don't have it here either.
Oh, yeah, no, and a few nights ago, there was a group that got together with one of the radio stations, and they were playing New York, New York on the radio for people to sing along to out their windows.
That's really great. It's heartwarming. I hope you were singing loudly, Marie.
No, but But I stuck my head out the bathroom window for a couple of minutes, and I was like, wow, my neighbors really can't sing, but that's nice.
So, Delfeayo, just to kind of refocus our conversation here, I definitely wanted to have you talk about Jazz Party, your new album, and tell people what this album is about, what the conception of it was, and let's just have you kind of take the reins on that and go ahead.
Yeah, well, we've been grappling as jazz artists and jazz educators for years with what I term the more the Western approach and the Eastern approach. And by that I mean that the Eastern approach is more for things to have a practical use, and the Western is more from an analytical standpoint of view. So, for example, some places in Africa, they don't want necessarily art to hang on the walls. They want art that has a social significance and that they have a belief in. It's something, if it's about, a bountiful crops or, a certain kind of an offering up to the heavens. And then sometimes when we study, the Western idea is more of preservation. So we want to have paintings, put them on the wall. Say, oh, yeah, this is a great painting. And in music, how that translates in jazz is sometimes the performers are not in contact with the audiences so much. It's more, I want to perfect my craft and then present it. And if the audience likes it, that's fine, but it's more important that they respect my artistry. And the whole idea of jazz, from its inception, it was a music for the people, for the audiences. It was not, and I guess that's how all the music started off. Even in the European tradition, the music started off either in the church or it was secular. So it was either, for sacred purposes or, maybe you got these guys who were the guys, the Renaissance singers, and they would go around with the lutes singing love songs,
The troubadour.
I guess, so it had that kind of an element. That turned into this kind of a situation where you just sit in the concert hall, you watch, you listen, then everything is over, you clap. So it's like the jazz artists, I think we're struggling with, do we want that approach or do we want the approach more from the islands? Like, Pedrito Martinez, for example. If people just sit there and don't engage in his audiences, I think that's disappointing to him. And his performance is such where you're getting up and dancing and you're participating, so the audience has an opportunity to participate. The idea with Jazz Party is that everybody's part of the party. So it's not just the musicians having a good time, but we invite the audience to participate with us.
Well, in New Orleans, we have a decided advantage from the standpoint of a couple of things. First is we often play in front of audiences, and there's an entertaining element. And it doesn't matter what the show is. If you're playing, straight ahead, you're playing swing, you're playing modern, you're playing the brass band, you're playing the top 40. Like, there's always that element of entertainment. Also, the advantage is that we grew up hearing the sound of the brass band in the streets. And that, even if you if you never play in a brass band, you have that sound, and that's one of joy and celebration, and it's a party, and you know that that's happening. So what we wanted to do with Jazz Party was bring that indigenous New Orleans sound to modern jazz. So we're mixing all of that, and my belief is that the jazz musician of the future will be able to play convincingly many styles, starting with the early 1900s and up to what's being played today, on the radio and things that you hear in the popular arena. So that's what we try to, without making a big thing of it, like, oh, we don't like to define our music, but it's actually the truth. So sometimes people will come to the show and they say, man, I never knew jazz sounded like this. And it's just one of those things. And I'm saying, jazz can really almost sound like anything if you understand the roots of it and you hook it up a certain kind of way. And that's what we're doing.
I've had the benefit, and Marie has probably had this experience too with the show. But what I was going to mention is seeing two completely different settings for the Uptown Jazz Orchestra. One was at the Hartford Jazz Festival, which is a massive outdoor festival on a big stage in front of thousands and thousands of people. But the other context was at a very, very small club in New York. And what struck me was the ability of your musicians to play to the setting. And before we got cut off, you mentioned a quote from Baby Dodds, but that resonated with me because in the smaller setting, you guys were so sensitive to it being a smaller setting, and the sound was just amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how many people told me they couldn't believe how good it sounded in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the wider or the bigger setting for the festival, obviously the band knew how to project as needed, but that's something you don't really see that or get to hear that often. The band being able to adapt just so perfectly to two completely different settings. And in either case, what you were describing wasn't lost. The sort of the party aspect of it, the way you want the audience to be a part of it, it worked in both settings. So I thought that was really cool and worth mentioning.
Right. Well, all of it stems from the. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
All of it stems from brass band sound. And, I have a number of players, especially Roger Lewis, the Dirty Old Man, and he was the founding father of the Dirty Dozen brass band. And he's been playing music for 60 plus years of his life. He's in his late 70s, but he got the backbone of the group, and he plays with so much passion and energy. Everybody loves the Dirty Old Man.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
But so for example, when we play festivals now, we almost don't let any, what you would say, the softer side of jazz or that particular way, because it's an outdoor setting, it's lots of people, and you have to bring the energy a different way. So we still want to have the variety, but when we come out hard hitting. Like we know if we in the New Orleans, that's how folks play. But if you're in a jazz club or a smaller setting, then it's really wonderful because then the audience gets to experience, it's almost like a 8 or 10 course meal. So we might start off with the energetic brass band song, then we go to something that's swing. Then we can play something that's soft, really soft. And it requires a lot of control, but also an understanding and to have a certain sensibility on the instruments. And then we can feature everybody. So, we think about all of this. And when we're playing outdoor festivals, that's the main thing is, we got to keep that energy high all of the time, for if it's 75 minutes of high energy, and it's not an easy thing. We might still play maybe one ballad, but, again, that's something that is unique to, and then sometimes we might play a venue that's somewhere in between. So, for example, we played in Pinecrest, and that's a venue that's somewhere between the club setting and the outdoor festival.
How much of your set would you say is informed by the individual musicians in the band?
What do you mean?
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is when people think about a large jazz ensemble, they have a lot of references that come to mind. They might think about anything from how Duke Ellington wrote for his ensemble. They might think about something completely different or completely more modern. But what I'm wondering is because your band has some of these musicians in it that have so much experience. You mentioned Dirty Old Man. There's other musicians in the band as well. I'm just wondering, do you write and arrange for the specific people in your band, or how do you approach doing that for the set of music that you put on?
Right. We have certain types of arrangements, but for me, the most important thing is understanding what I'd like to accomplish emotionally from the audience. What do I want to happen emotionally? And then I know the musicians who can give me that. So, for example, Roger Lewis, if he's on the gig, he always solos first. He's like, one of the great opening pitchers. Like, that strike is coming down the middle of the plate when he gets the ball. That's just what's going to happen. So if Roger's on the gig, he's always soloing first. Now, if he's not on, then we have a fellow by the name of Roderick Paulin. We need a New Orleans guy, because the New Orleans guys know how to open up the show with a certain kind of charisma and flair. And then after that, for example, I say, okay, now we're going to play something maybe that's swinging. Then we have, for example, Kyrie Allen Lee is our lead alto saxophonist. Andrew Bayham is trumpet player, and they're well versed. So it's like the second song is important too, because okay, the people are worked up, a lot of energy on the first song. The second song is as important because now it's like, okay, where is this going to go? That's really when the audience decides, that's when you let the audience know who you are and what you actually do at that point. So that, it's just very important. So for example, we might have a vocal song on the first song. We'll never have a vocal the second song. Now that I think about it, I hadn't thought of that. But a vocal usually on the first song. Then we play a swing song. That'll be probably the song that I play on. I very seldom solo on the first song. I let the band set that up. And then we have Kyrie Allen Lee there, Andrew Bayham, depending on whether or not they solo. And then kind of depends on where the audience is, will then depend on what we're going to do third. Now, again, if we're at a festival, then it's going to be probably 3 New Orleans songs in a row, and then something funky, something, up-tempo, like from our first CD, Back to Africa, is a very energetic song that it works well, a lot of, high energy. So anyway, to answer the song directly, it's a combination of the arrangements that are made for specific musicians, but also the song selection and knowing who is going to put us where we need to be emotionally at that particular moment in that song.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning, too, that you're able to create an emotional connection even before you guys step onto the stage, just by nature of the way the show begins, with the band coming through whatever the setting happens to be, whether you're able to come down through the audience or mix with the audience, but either way, playing your instruments as you guys actually walk on the stage. I think that really tells people, okay, we're in for something different and exciting here. Most bands or most shows that people are seeing, they're not starting that way, and I think that really sets you guys apart in a great way.
Yeah, and again, you think jazz orchestra, okay, what is this? Okay, these guys are sitting down, they're reading music. And it's just kind of, we call it Uptown Jazz Orchestra, but we combine that brass band, that's a brass band thing. Guys are walking around with the instruments, and usually that's how we prefer to set up. We prefer to set up where we're all standing up like in the front line, as opposed to, the typical saxophones are in the front sitting down, and the trombones are behind them, and then the trumpets. That for us, it's harder for us to really to bring out the kind of energy that we like when we're set up like that. Occasionally, depending on the size of the room, we'll do that. But, our thing is just to have that energy and excitement. And, we have guys in the band that are really, they love music. They love playing. And that is the most important aspect.
I was thinking about this, Marie. You've had the opportunity to see the band at their home base in New Orleans at Snug Harbor. What was that experience like?
What was interesting, because it was my first time seeing the band live myself, and it was really interesting watching the audience, because I was sort of standing in the back, and it was and then I remember at some point, dirty old man got off the stage and started dancing with people, and I was standing there just going, please don't come all the way back here. But it was interesting to see that even before they started, it seems to me at least, that people who are there to see the band before the band even starts coming out, they're there because it's sort of like they're already there wanting to have a good time. So it's sort of like, because it's a much more relaxed atmosphere than even, I would say, like a jazz club in New York. There's just such a different vibe to it. And I would say that's like, so I think that how the band starts the show and enters the room and everything, I think it's sort of necessary because the people sitting there are really hungry for it and expecting, like, they're expecting that party. I think that's kind of like the vibe that, at least that was what I observed. And I just remember that by the end of the night, my face hurt from like laughing and from smiling so much because it was almost as much fun watching the audience as it was watching the band.
Yeah, and that Dirty Old Man. I mean, that when we play that, the whole set when Roger is playing centers on finishing with that song, Dirty Old Man, because that's the crowd pleaser. You know, that's like the song that everybody wants to experience and to be a part of. And so that's the thing for us is to try to take down the mystique of, like, you have some mystique because jazz, again, there's a mystique to it. And I always tell the musicians, you know, when we're not singing, we're playing abstract music. It's abstract to people because we're soloing and there's no words to kind of say, oh, this is a love song or this is about lost love. They're requiring on us in how we play and our understanding of making that happen instrumentally with our instruments, you know. So it's a great challenge, but for us, the variety of music is, I think, really what is captivating because you have, again, the New Orleans sound, you have the swing sound, then we might play something like Mingus, like the Raid on the Mingus House Party, where you have just, you know, controlled chaos and 10 different melodies going on at the same time. So that's an example. And then from that, maybe we do something that's maybe old school, soft, like an old soft chew song or All of Me, a nice standard. So it's fun to juxtapose those different ideas. So, you know, that's our whole thing is from an entertainment standpoint of view. And we also look around and we're saying, man, what do people really, and that's what people, they really need something that's kind of fun, family oriented and entertaining. You know, that's kind of where the country needs things to let them know. They need music to let them know, man, everything is going to be cool. You know, that's just, I think it's very important to have that. And sometimes you go to musician shows and man, it could be complicated and it could be well rehearsed and well studied. But from an emotional standpoint of view, the audience is like, yeah, we liked it. We enjoyed it. We're like, we want to play something that y'all love. We want you to know that we're here for you. And that's the New Orleans thing.
Well, I'm very confident that the show that you guys put on is entirely accessible. And I think if you're in a situation for an audience who may not know what they're in for. They might be there because a friend brought them along, or you might be performing at a performing arts center that has a subscription series and people have a subscription to the entire series and they decide to come to this because, I don't know, for whatever reason, but they don't really know what they're getting into. But I'm pretty confident that every time you guys do your show, it is so, nothing is lost on the audience. It's very accessible. And even though there is improvisation, there is nothing, I don't think it comes across as abstract. I mean, I completely get your point that for people who don't have the ear for it or the understanding of what improvisation is, it absolutely can be abstract. But the way you guys present it, I just want to hit home the point. It's very accessible, and I know the audience reactions that you're getting prove that.
Well, but the other part of that is, when I say it's abstract, you have a song like Back to Africa. Sometimes you need that. You know, we played, just to give you an example, talking about accessible, we played a fundraiser here in New Orleans. It was at the World War II Museum. And there was a request from the person that booked us, and they said they just wanted, New Orleans tunes to keep people in a good mood and standards. We were like, okay, cool. So we're playing When the Saints and Second Line and Take the A Train and All of Me. So we did the set, and as the night got on, and things loosened up, the person comes up and they said, y'all can open it up a little bit. So we were like, cool. I mean, we had played Mr. Magic and a Chameleon, Watermelon, just all the hit songs that people enjoy when they're at these types of events. So it's like coming on the last song, and I'm like, Back to Africa, or the second to last song. So the people have been up to that point. They've been hearing everything that's diatonic and it's accessible. And man, we're just going at it. And it's just one of those things where the rhythm is really strong and it's energetic, and the sax player is doing his thing and the trumpet player is, and so the people, so two things happened. The people who were talking, I could see that they were making their way closer to the door and further away from the bandstand. But there were other people who had just finished dancing to whatever we played, probably a funk tune, and they were like watching this, and they were looking at it, and they were like, I could tell they were like, man. And one of the guys that worked with the sound crew when we finished the performance, he came up, he said, man, bro, what was that last song y'all played? And he said, the second to last song, because we always end up, I think, with Wonderful World. He said, what was that song y'all played? And man, I don't know what was happening, but I know something was happening, because man, man, that was off the chain. And that's the kind of response that we're looking for. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, now, as I describe it, now we're all going into the abyss. And when we're up in that abyss, you're just like, hold on. But to me, that is really something that's exciting for individuals because, again, if we're playing the Duke Ellington standards or songs that everybody knows, people will like that. But it's also our responsibility and the reason we practice and we work on our music to bring the audience somewhere where they're not going to be able to go. And that is one of the advantages if you're, a musician and we're studying all these years for that. Whereas if you go to, a different kind, maybe it's a vocal and it's a popular concert, it's a pop music, you know what that is and you love it. Audiences love it because they know exactly what it's going to be. And there's a consistency to it. Whereas with jazz, you have to not only have the consistency and the popularity, but to me, you want to bring the audience somewhere that's unexpected and then resolve it. It's still going to be cool.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, if your description there doesn't get people excited or curious to see this, I don't know what would, because that's the essence of it. It's a very exciting show.
Yeah, I know. I've heard from more than a few presenters. Even there was one in particular where I was working because I was advancing this gig for Delfeayo, and I was working with the woman who is the technical, person running all of the the production aspects at the venue, and she made a point ahead of time to tell me that I should pass on to Delfeayo that their audience is notoriously stoic and that these bands shouldn't take it personally if they don't seem very excited or very interested. And then it was halfway through the show and she started texting me. She goes, I can't believe it, but they're all standing on their feet and dancing. She's like, I've never seen this before.
Right. That was Moorhead, Minnesota. Oh yeah, I remember. Right. That's close to Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
actually, the folks in Pinecrest said the same thing.
Well, I was going to say,
right.
You guys have the ability to get people dancing who would normally not dance, maybe shouldn't be dancing, but they just can't help themselves.
Well, and the other part of that
literally pulling it out of them.
Jazz it's an interesting thing, and jazz has gotten kind of not always gotten a good rap for good reason and bad reason. People expect one thing or certain things from jazz. So they wouldn't expect, I'm going to this jazz concert, they're going to have me up dancing and singing and having a good time. They expect, okay, there's going to be a certain type of artistry and proficiency. And, my take on it is that jazz can be all of these. Jazz is everything. It's real life. So you could go to, for example, the great thing about the way my dad played on his shows is that he was not one to be about that type of entertainment, and he played what he played. He grew up in, what they call the bebop era, and right after bebop, and that's what he did. And he was a great example of a master musician. And when you went to his shows, you were expecting and you were experiencing a different kind of thing. Here is a master craftsman, and he just plays his piano, and it's a great thing. And that's the great thing about New Orleans is you can go to a show like that, or you can come to our show. It has totally different. You might have, a show like the way that Trombone Shorty plays, which is just rock, or someone like, Kermit Ruffins, who's doing his version of the Louis Armstrong sound. So here in New Orleans, you could hear all these different styles, and it works. And actually, we played a festival once, and I was playing music of Ornette Coleman quartet, so with no piano, and I was laughing because they opened the show with a fellow by the name of Jeremy Davenport, and he's singing, like the crooner music, and then they come to our band, so you got kind of the Frank Sinatra sound, and now you have Ornette Coleman, which is completely different. And then right after that, they have Kermit Ruffins, and he's, singing his reefer songs and this celebratory thing. And it's like only in New Orleans would you have, in that close proximity, that disparate or that kind of range of music. And for us, man, it's all cool. It's all, and I can't really express how great that is. Like, we could go with the brass band guys and respect what they're doing, and they have respect for what we're doing. And we could all come together and play and make it work out. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's so great. Is there anything we haven't covered about the new album or the band that is worth mentioning when we have the chance?
So the idea with Jazz Party was that all of the music was going to represent like a party environment or something that was really about social interaction. So we start off with Jazz Party, and of course that's the Venerable Tanya Boyd Cannon is singing that. And, it's like a gospel flavored tune.
We're gonna have a jazz party all night long. We're gonna have a jazz party till the break of dawn. We're gonna have a jazz party all night long. So won't you come uptown? We're gonna party till the break of dawn.
So it's real like easy going. Like, we're going to have a jazz party all night long. So come on out. We're going to have a good time. And then from there, we go to the Blackbird Special, and that's one of the great Dirty Dozen brass band songs. And it's really great because it's a high-energy song, but also they use some of the riffs that you would equate with the James Brown band, James Brown, the J.B. Horn. And Blackbird Special is a song that you hear, like concert bands play that song. So any band loves to play the Blackbird Special. And then from there we go to 7-Word Boogaloo, and that's a tune where our drummer Joe Dyson Jr. he's kind of combining what you would hear on the radio as far as the drum rhythm. He's combining that with what we would consider the jazz boogaloo sound. So that's something that we're always trying to figure out how can we incorporate what the youngsters are playing and what they're doing. And that's a good example. Then we get to the Raid on the Mingus House Party. Now that's the one, it's just real chaos. It's chaotic. And that's the idea. And what I said is, what I notice is when we're watching CNN or Fox News or a lot of times ESPN, we're constantly inundated with more information than we can handle. So I said, how can we put this in a song? Because that's just where we are today in our society. There's things coming at you from every direction. And that's the way Mingus House Party is. That's one of the favorites. People like that because, like my man said, you know something is going on. Even if you don't know what, you know something is happening on that song. Now the song, Mboya's Midnight Cocktail, of course, is dedicated to my younger brother, Mboya. And I really love that. It's my favorite song because there's a narration, and the idea is that, you know, we're at the bar and it's late, it's after hours, and the bartender is, in a sense, coming on to my younger brother. And he is, of course, nonverbal. And the rules of the song is that she takes his being nonverbal like he's playing hard to get. So she's like, she's delivering the lines like, oh, you know, she's conjuring. There's a whole thing that she's conjuring in her mind what's going on in his mind. So that's kind of, that's good. Yeah, that kind of really kind of captures my sense of humor. I think that Boy's Midnight Cocktail is good. So New Orleans is a song by Dr. Braxton Miller, and that's the party song. That's the party song of the record. And he's describing what it's like to be from New Orleans. And of course, we got Roger Lewis, and he's playing that sax, baritone, saxophone sound. And that's really a fun song.
I'm so New Orleans, we like syncopated beats with uptown grooves. When you hear that big bass drum, yeah, you can't help but move. I'm so New Orleans, from the West Bank to the East. No matter where you live, drop that beat, we buck jump in the street.
Dr. Hargrove is our tribute to the great Hargrove, who, you know, unfortunately passed on last year, or maybe at this point the year before. But he was really one great trumpeter of his time, and he really played with a certain kind of intellectual curiosity and a spirit that I hope to have captured in that particular song. And I, of course, one of the few people who actually Roy played in my band. Like Roy came up, by the time he was 19, he had his own band. He didn't have a lot of folks because he was under their tutelage, but really a great musician. Let Your Mind Be Free, and that's another one of our brass band specialties. That comes from the Soul Rebels. And again, it's just that energy of the brass band. You won't hear any other jazz orchestra playing with that kind of energy, where we could go out on the street and challenge a lot of the guys out here playing. And we go straight from that to the Irish Whiskey Blues. That's an old jump blues. That's really our specialty. And the jump blues, as you can imagine, the jump, it's a certain kind of dance, and it has that dance element for the whole thing. I love this song because it comes straight out swinging hard and through the whole song. I added a middle section, which is a tribute to Kenny Kirkland. So we goes from the older style swing or jump into more of what you would consider a modern. So the saxophone solos over a modern section. So that's a good example of how we're blending all the different styles. And then, of course, Caribbean Sex Line is a brass band tribute to the sounds of the Caribbean, written by Trombone Shorty's older brother, James Andrews, who is a great trumpeter. They call him 12. And then, of course, we close out with the instrumental version of Mboya's Midnight Cocktail. And that's how you want to end every party. It's nice and relaxed and laid back. And it's time to go home. That's it.
Thank you for going through the album. I mean, this is really great. And anybody any presenters who are listening to this who's not heard the album yet, we're going to make sure that they get a chance to listen, and we'll send them a link because this is something really special. Thank you for taking all the time and effort to just put this together and pull it off. I hope you're proud of the work you put into it.
Oh yeah, what you're talking about, this podcast or the CD?
I'm proud of the work I put into the podcast. You should be proud of the work you put into the music.
Oh yeah, I make great CDs. That's what I do. I mean, that's what I do. So, like I said, I'm gearing up for the next one.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
All right, bro. And yeah, we'll keep this thing going, and I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye. Bye.
All right, man.